Hello, everyone. Welcome to Astrology Insights. My name is Ricardo, and today I'm sitting here with Vincent, and we're going to talk about the new moon. Um, we have a new moon coming, depending on when we're going to post this video on the 20th of April, which is in Aries. Um, but we also want to reflect on the new moon that was in Aries a couple of weeks ago. On 0 degrees, if I'm
Yes.
correct. Yeah, Vincent, the new moon energy. What can you tell us about it, and where it was located, and what does it have to say?
Great. Well, thank you. The new moon in general means that something new is beginning. To be more precise, on the level of the moon energy, what moon energy means in astrology. And moon energy in astrology has to do mostly with feelings. You might call it the ebb and flow movement of feelings, of subjective impressions, the things that bubble up inside yourself. They have kind of a flow, more or less reminiscent of ebb and flow movement, the sea. And it follows this rhythm of new moon, full moon, new moon, full moon. But as most people know, new moon falls every time in a different place in the zodiac, usually in a different sign and sometimes in the same sign, in some exceptional cases, like now, a few weeks ago, just at the beginning of the sign of Aries and on April 20th of 2023, right at the end of Aries. In the same sign happens usually once every 19 years. Like Aries was 19 years ago, also two new moons in the sign of Aries, but a new moon in the same sign happens every 2 or 3 years, almost like every almost 3 years. So it's exceptional, but it's not super exceptional. But anyhow, this change of positions also makes the energy of the moon, this ebb and flow of feelings and subjective impressions, all the themes that come up inside you, different. They shift in the course of a year and the course of years. So that's in general what the new moon means. And a little bit more specific, the new moon also signifies a new cycle of the moon, and the cycle of the moon is pretty fast. It's a little less than a month. It's 29 days. And the new moon signifies the beginning of this cycle. The new moon energy can give you information of themes or domains of life where you don't even have to focus on them because they will just come up in your life or just inside yourself. You really don't need any conscious effort in that field. You might, the only thing is you can give it a more positive impulse when you manifest some intentions in this particular field, or just in general, some positive intentions around new moon, the day of new moon, or the day just before, just after new moon. We manifest some positive emotions, positive intentions for whatever themes will come up in this
Interesting.
cycle.
Interesting. Yeah, to speak about those intentions, like,
Yeah.
for example, I use it like proactively, I think, in a way that kind of suits me, that I learned through the years. So every new moon, I sit with myself, but also sometimes with you. We have a phone call, or we sit together and we talk about like how the new moon influences my life
Yeah.
and looking at my personal horoscope. So the
Mhm.
way I did it this time, that reflecting on the new moon of like on what date was it? In
March 21st.
March 21st. I basically sat down. I saw the new moon was in 0 degrees Aries, and that made a connection within my horoscope with the fourth house,
Mhm.
but also the Aries energy,
Yeah.
which is the energy of initiation, also entrepreneurship, independency.
Mhm.
So those two combined, house 4 and the sign Aries,
Yeah.
I try to focus my intentions on those specific subject or with
Mhm.
these
Mhm.
with like a color of this subject.
Yeah.
So for example, I was traveling
Yes.
for like 6 months, and well, coming home
Mhm.
and feeling the sense of home
Yeah.
was a subject for me. It was a house 4 subject, but also the Aries energy. I try to like combine the two. For example, I really wanted to like go on with my business and get the projects going. So that I felt was really like Aries type of energy.
Yes.
Am I doing it correctly then, or what can you say about that?
Well, strictly speaking, it's not entirely correct, but there are no general rules in astrology that everybody should abide to. It's just when you study astrology for a somewhat longer time, you start to understand it a little bit better. Um, so I'll explain you what my viewpoint is on this. Um, the position of the new moon in Aries, like for instance now in Aries, um, is from really a professional astrological point of view, not super relevant. It's not totally irrelevant, but it's not very relevant. It is relevant in the same sense that it is relevant for all of us, that we're now in spring. And because we're in spring, the new moon also is in Aries. Aries is a spring sign. Um, it's not irrelevant that it is spring now. It's a different atmosphere than like being winter. But it's really something in the background for everybody.
Mm.
People react to the energy of spring, everybody in his or her own way, but it's not the main thing in your life. It's not very much connected to the really personal themes in your life.
Mm.
If you want to know more about those in relation to the new moon, you really have to check the chart, the horoscope.
Mm.
In that case, you just look at the degree where the new moon falls.
Mm-hmm.
The last new moon in this case was March 21st, 2023. That was a new moon in 0 degrees Aries. And the next new moon of April 2023 will be in 29 degrees Aries. Um, for an astrologer, that's technical information because it gives you a clue where to look in the chart, in a personal chart. So in everybody's chart, I would look, for example, at 0 degrees Aries for the last new moon, and then for a forecast for the next period of 4 weeks to the 29 degrees Aries. But in every chart, these two positions fall in a different place, a different house. And that's relevant information. Um, I know not everybody knows what a house is in astrology. We'll make a separate video on that. But just as there are 12 signs, there are 12 houses. And you might consider the houses as your personal signs.
Mm.
And I will elaborate on that in a later video. But in your case, so although the last new moon was in 0 degrees Aries, and Aries resembles the energy of the first house, it's the first sign, first house. In your case, the new moon was in the fourth house, which has more of a Cancer energy.
Hmm.
So as an astrologer, I would expect that fourth house themes, or to put it more general, Cancer themes will be more brought profiled, brought to the foreground instead of Aries themes.
Could you name some fourth
Yes.
house themes or Cancer themes?
Um, the most basic meanings of the fourth house are home. So not so much a house, but really feeling home. And an even deeper meaning of the fourth house is roots. In whatever terms you want to define roots, where you come from, that's the fourth house. So it's the family where you come from, it's the country where you come from, it's the people or the race where you come from, it's where you come from.
That's very interesting. As in, so these subjects kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, I was traveling for like 6 months and I already booked my flight like way in advance, but
Yeah,
like I was precisely like 2 weeks ago I arrived home and
yeah,
felt the sense of family in my home
yeah,
country, my seeing my parents
yeah,
again, like
yeah,
operating from home too,
yeah,
and it felt so good to be there and I felt so secure and safe. So it's actually kind of like funny and how these things go, but that
yeah,
it's always like aligned in a way.
yes.
But then I have a question though, because I also felt what I thought was some strong Aries energy.
Mm-hmm.
Me working,
Yeah,
coming home,
yeah,
going directly to
yeah,
work,
yeah,
and like my business, like seeing all my clients,
yeah.
and I really felt like good energy and like like go energy. I
Mm-hmm.
could like
Mm-hmm.
work for like I don't know 50 hours easily. Whereas I thought before coming home, I was like I'm gonna like slowly settle and just like get into my routine. Um, but then I
Mm-hmm.
just absorbed
Yeah,
like business and client calls and
yeah.
just new things happening. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, this is very like Aries energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go, go,
Mm-hmm.
go.
Yes.
So that's how I made the connection.
Yeah.
So I thought this background color,
Mm-hmm.
as you described it, had
Yeah.
like really
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah. So you might expect, say, before this new moon, that there's a new moon in Aries coming, so there's probably a period in my life where I will be very energetic and really taking initiatives and
Yes, exactly.
things like that.
That's what actually like
Yeah. Yeah.
like happened also. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I can imagine you think like this. It's not entirely wrong, but it's certainly not completely right in terms of astrology, how it really works. Um, it is a fact that in your personal chart, Aries is very well represented in the fourth house, as well as the fifth house, by the way.
Mhm.
The cusp, the cusp means the beginning of the fourth house, is in Pisces, but most of the fourth house is filled by the sign of Aries. So there is a connection between this general background of spring energy, Aries energy, and your fourth house, the domain, all the subjects connected to the fourth house. I just mentioned to home and roots. Somehow they have a Aries coloring. Also Pisces actually, which is the cusp. And the cusp, the beginning of the house, is always the strongest, most dominating point area in a house. So in general, as an astrologer, you look at the cusp, the beginning of a house, to determine the energy of this domain. So if I wanted to know something in general about your roots, I'd say, oh, okay, Pisces roots. But with a new moon, um, you can see, you might say, the background energy of the house. Because when you look at your chart, you can see, okay, cusp is in Pisces, but most of the fourth house is in Aries. But it doesn't come out except when there's a planet there. For example, a planet transiting, a planet passing. And that, in this case, it's the moon, the new moon falling in Aries, in the first degree of Aries, which is also a strong Aries degree. Um, a planet in that position activates the energy that you might call the background of a house. There's usually, not always, but in many houses, in many charts, there is a certain degree, a certain sign energy on the cusp, but then further in the house, there is some other energy of the following sign. And that comes out more stronger in case a planet touches that sign. So that's what's happening. So, okay, I can imagine you recognize this Aries energy in this specific fourth house domain. The other important thing when really trying to interpret a new moon in a chart is not by looking at this general characteristic, which is in this case 0 degrees Aries, so Aries energy is this and that. It's not very meaningful on a personal level. Then I have to look a little bit more technical. I would have to look at what astrologers call aspects in the chart. Aspects, you might translate that as connections, sort of energy or symbolic connections in the chart. So when the new moon is on 0 degrees Aries, as an astrologer, you have a tool to make connections within the chart. You just look at everything that's around 0 degrees elsewhere in the chart. Not exactly 0, but just 0 plus a little bit or 0 minus a little bit. And then I see, for example, that just across the chart, on the other side of the chart, is the moon in the 10th house. And there's also a connection with your rising sign and with the descendant, where that's on the other across the rising sign. And there's a connection with the sun in the first house. The rising sign is the beginning of the first house, the cusp of the first house. The first house has an Aries energy. Your sun is in your first house. So when the sun is activated and a new moon activates, you have your sun, which is your core energy, activated in the first house. So as an astrologer, I would say, okay, now I understand that you feel this Aries energy. It's not coming from the new moon in Aries, it's coming from your own first house and the sun in the first house.
Yeah, it's a connection made.
Yeah. And it is also connected with something about relationships in your life, or a relation is also sort of activated because the sign, the descendant on the other side of the chart, right across the rising sign, is touch, and that has to do with relationships. And the midheaven is being touch, which is just across this your fourth house. Midheaven often has to do with career, ambition, profession. So it has to do with relation, and profession. And the interesting thing is that except the sun, also the moon is being touched. There's a connection being made with your moon, quite a strong connection. And the moon in itself has a fourth house or Cancer-like meaning. So the themes, these home and root themes from the fourth house that are being activated by the new moon, are sort of activated again in the field of ambition, of profession, because the moon is being touched. As you hear me speaking, astrology is actually combining symbols to create a meaning. So in this case, is probably, I can relate to what you just said, a homecoming during this cycle of when it was new moon, you were still not home, you were still abroad already for 6 months or even more. And exactly during this cycle, I think around the full moon actually, you came home.
Yeah.
And the full moon is usually full moon, and a week after full moon is when that which was present in potency, like in a seed, like in an intention, manifests. Full moon is a period of manifestation. The new moon is the period of sowing the seed. So the themes of the new moon usually manifest during the full moon period.
And the week after, right? You were saying the third week mostly is the one that...
In my experience, the third week is usually the week where the strongest manifestation occurs.
Interesting. So yeah, it was me coming home at that time. At the same time, also diving into business from like the next day on. And it's interesting that you say like that you mentioned the roots. Like my roots in some way is business. I come from like an entrepreneurial family, a family of growers, like people that are in horticulture, growing plants. My grandfathers also vegetables. Like so. It's like a family of entrepreneurs within the horticulture industry, which is plants, flowers, and both sides, both my mom and my dad. My mom is a florist actually, and my business also has to do with, or a lot of my customers are within this segment of industry. And I always say like this, like it's called Horti Online. Like Horti is my roots in a way. So it's nice. Like I figured out that link while you were.
And you also live with your parents.
Yeah.
So you live with your parents that are both from this culture, this typical local culture within the Netherlands.
Yeah.
It's a very specific culture. Everybody in the Netherlands, I think, knows these people, the kind of people they are. So you live with your parents. Your parents are from this culture, and you live in this area.
Yeah, exactly.
Where all your ancestors have been living and working. So that's very much that's it couldn't be a better symbol for the fourth house.
Yeah.
That's really rooted, it sounds. And also this connection between home in a double meaning, like you work at home, but also you work in your parents' home, where you grew up, in the area where you grew up. There's where your work is.
Yeah.
So that's super fourth house. And the moon also a very strong symbol of the moon in the 10th house. So this home and root culture in the field of profession.
Yeah. Interesting. Sometimes we get so caught up in the conversation that we forget that there is a camera right there, and we forget to do a proper ending to the episode. So here is. Thank you, listeners. We really hope you enjoyed our content of today. And yes, please subscribe and follow us if you'd like to see more episodes in the near future. And we hope to see you next time.